I want to begin by saying thank you to our panelists. Thank you so, so much for joining. As I began, I said, this is Kara Olmurani Symposium, virtual symposium. We have this every year, once a year. I know it should be more because of the conversation that we are having. And Kara Olmurani basically means I am a warrior. It is an organization that that helps sexually abused children. We specifically deal with children, and today we want to really center on our children. So what we are doing this year is the theme that we have been working with this year, and this is a global theme. It is Together We Act, United We Change. So when we have our panelists, we brought in the best of the best that they will be able to help us in this conversation. I must say, I acknowledge that this is not an easy conversation. So this is going to have triggers for those who maybe have gone through this or they have a close relative that has gone through this. And so we just want to put that out there so that you can have a comforter, someone who you're able to talk to. And if it is too much, you can always switch off and come back to it later. That will be okay. I can see we have quickly jumped to 232 of us. That is so good. Keep sharing, keep sharing. I know I reached out to so many of us, and so many of us said we want to be a part of this conversation. So this is you being a part of this conversation. I will begin by asking our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will take it from there as we know, so that we can know who we are talking to. So Karibuni, I want to begin with the person who is on my very top right, and that is Margaret. Please introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and then we will keep going like that.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Terry, for having me. It's an honor, and to get to discuss and to share on this very, like you say, very sensitive conversation, but a timely conversation. So my name is Margaret Njihia. I'm a clinical psychologist. I am also a child therapist with Sterling Wellness Center. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Kizzy, go on.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you for putting this together. It's a very important topic. I am Dr. Kizzy Shako, a forensic medical practitioner in Kenya, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Elvis?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Terry, for having me. My name is Elvis Abenga. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I have been practicing predominantly in the field of family law and children and the law and child rights for a while now. So it's good to be here.
Amazing. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, we will have Duncan introduce himself. He's not able to be on camera, but he's going to be with us today.
Good evening. My name is Duncan Wendimu. My apologies, I can't switch on my camera. I'm on the road, and it's extremely sensitive topic, and I appreciate what you've done to bring us together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Once again, thank you so much to our panelists for agreeing to be here. We all have very busy schedules, and just for you to create time for this, we appreciate, because this truly is just building the community and being a part of it. And so we want to start off with Margaret. We want you to lay a foundation of what we're talking about. So we'll be talking about sexual abuse and how we can come together. One of the things that I realized quickly as a home that rescues sexually abused children is we cannot play it by ourselves. So when we started, we believed we have it figured out, we have it all together. But then we quickly realized we need the police, we need the lawmakers, we need the therapists, we needed all these arms. So to marry all these arms wasn't easy, and it still is not easy, but at least we have some semblance of how we move. And so my question to you, Margaret, then would be, as you work closely with child survivors, because that could be your day-to-day, you know, you would see different child survivors, but we want to, you know, tackle really on the sexual abuse child survivors. How does trauma manifest itself? You know, because at times we look at our children and we judge them face value. We believe, hey, they look okay. You know, this thing seems to be doing good. But then how does it manifest? I'm sure you've seen very many different ways. So help a parent today, help a grandmother today, help someone today from a psychological perspective. Children, how does it manifest in children compared to adults? Margaret.
Probably, sorry, I may interrupt. Probably that question that you've asked, Margaret, I actually saw it when I was prosecuting a case in Narok. This was a kid who was on her second stillbirth at 13 years old. So you will never, ever, 13 years old. I'm there for only 3 years. How do I do that? Probably she can respond to how, as a prosecutor, how do I respond? How do I deal with that kid, a 13-year-old kid with a second stillbirth? How do I deal with that? Probably she can answer that question.
All right. Thank you, Duncan. And the rest of the panelists, you can always chime in. We want to have a very, you know, a flowing conversation. Thank you for that. Yes, Margaret.
Thank you, Terry. I think let's first go back a step back.
Okay.
And ask ourselves, we're talking about sexual abuse, but what is it?
Right.
I think we start by looking at what is it that we are talking about, so that even as Duncan is asking, and every other person who is, you know, logged into the call this evening, so that then now we can say this is child sexual abuse and this is something different. So the first thing to note is we are talking about a child. So we are talking about anyone below the age of 18, because in Kenya, children, the legal age, we are talking about 0 to 18. Then the second thing to note here is that we are talking about 0 to 18, because we have seen children, you know, months old who have been sexually abused. So it is abuse. That's one. Two, it is serious. And number three, it's a harmful crime. So child sexual abuse, it is any activity with a child below the age of 18 and where the child cannot give informed consent. And the key word is informed consent. Because even when we look at children in terms of developmentally, and we're looking at them from psychological development, that part of the brain that is responsible for critical thinking, analysis, decision-making does not reach full maturity up to about the age of 25. And that is why now when we talk about children who are below 18, we are talking about informed consent. So, or a child who is developmentally unable to understand the nature of the sexual activity, maybe because also of other challenges that they are going through, maybe it's children who have certain disorders, or just a child who doesn't have the knowledge to understand what is this, that is, you know, this sexual activity. And when we talk about child sexual abuse, it is any of the activities that is performed by an adult or an older person to a younger child. And it's also important for us as we move on to also clarify at this point, anyone is a potential child abuser.
Right.
It's not about the guys on the streets. It can be even the closest significant persons in the child's life. So anyone can be a risk and a danger. Anyone.
Right.
It can happen anywhere, in hospitals, in churches, in schools, at
Mhm.
home. It can happen anywhere. So then the other thing, before I come to answer the question that you asked, is
Mhm.
what are the types of abuse
Right.
and sexual abuse that we are talking about here? And I know Elvis here, as a lawyer now, comes into, even help us understand this better legally. What are we talking about? But it is activities that are about touching a child's genital, forcing a child to touch someone's genital. It's the sexual intercourse, it's the oral sex, it's the anal sex, it's exposure of a child to pornographic material, it's the adults and exposing themselves, when they're not well dressed. It is taking the pictures or the images of a child and distributing these images. That is what we are talking about when we talk about child sexual abuse. So it's important for us to understand it is not just when there is penetration.
Right.
There are other forms
Right.
child sexual abuse. So coming to answer your question, and I know also Dr. Kizi can chime in into what we are talking about, the different forms and what happens even from a medical perspective. One of the things I want us to understand when we are talking about statistics of a child, these children who have been abused, irrespective of whether they are younger children below 10, who we describe as children of tender age, or the adolescents. It is not just about a statistic. It is about the life of a young person that has been profoundly impacted for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And that impact is seen, and these are the manifestations you're talking about. It impacts them psychologically, physically. Let's start there, because maybe Dr. Kizi will tell us where there is sexual abuse, there's a very high likelihood that there's going to be some physical impact.
Right.
It's physical, it is psychological, it is emotional. It's about disrupting that child in their day-to-day learning. And we will see what are the areas that they are impacted. But children, younger children, will manifest the symptoms differently and significantly differently from adolescents. And this is because, number one, of their developmental age. It's because of their understanding. The adolescent may have the words to explain and to talk about it, but a child who is younger than that may not have, they don't have the vocabulary to talk about what happened to them. And that's why, like for me as a child therapist as well, I use ways that I can reach out to a child better through art and play therapy to communicate. But for younger children, what do we see? We see regression. As a child who had acquired certain milestones, they look like they've lost those milestones. For example, they're comfortable sleeping in a room with the lights off. The child is not bedwetting. The child is no longer no longer clingy. Would let you go. Was okay even in the company of strangers, even when strangers came home, or visitors. Was comfortable even if it was in a church context or the faith community place. Was okay with school, but now all of a sudden there's a change of behavior because the manifestation is observable. It's because it's behavioral. So we pay attention to that. There'll be thumb sucking, they probably have lost appetite, they're not sleeping well, they're having nightmares. There's just a general observable change in behavior. They are excessively afraid. They are more likely to engage in a play that depicts what happened, where it happened, if you pay attention to it. And this play can be very repetitive because there is the anxiety that they're processing and the trauma that they are processing. You will see children they are manifesting what we call the psychosomatic symptoms. You know, they have Bahamba syndromes. They are sick, they have stomach aches, they have headaches. I mean, they have aches everywhere, but they're not organic aches. So they will be going to the hospitals. They are doing all manner of scans, x-rays, and every tests, but there is really nothing about that. You notice a change in their eating patterns, and you notice a change in their sleeping patterns. But Terry, this is only for people who are around the children, who are very keen to observe.
Right.
Let's emphasize. Because a lot, by the time maybe a parent notices, oh, this child is not sleeping too well, it's probably 2 or 3 weeks. By the time a parent notices that this child has been complaining consistently, I have a stomachache, I have a stomachache, then I calm them down, and then they go to school, and then maybe the parent is like, they just don't want to go to school. By the time it registers and it rings a bit like, wait a minute, Terry, something could be happening to Margaret here. It has taken a while. But the most important of the manifestation that I want to pay attention to is what we call the sexualized behaviors. Children with a history of sexual abuse, they tend to exhibit sexual behaviors that are inappropriate of their age. They will be mimicking sexually provocative, abusive acts. They want to touch you. They want to touch where they were touched. They want to reach out to your hand so that you can touch them.
Can this also manifest in a conversation? The conversation is very sexualized.
It can, especially where there is continued exposure. Maybe it is even watching of inappropriate material, so they pick the language and then they will use the language. And then you will notice it in emotional. Now, for adolescents, some of the three to four key things that you need to look out for and watch out for is the adolescents' change in behavior, where they're exhibiting behaviors that are more towards risk-taking behaviors. So wasn't smoking or doing drugs, they start doing drugs. They're drinking, was not careless in the way they did things. That an extremely careful child, but all of a sudden they are not. They're engaging in self-harm. There's generally, you will see they are starving themselves, because probably in the process of sexual abuse, someone said something about their body shamed them, and then sexual abuse is very demeaning and dehumanizing. It takes away your sense of dignity. And so the only way sometimes to cope with these very painful emotions and the trauma and the pain that they are going through, they tend to turn that pain inward. So some of them will starve themselves. Some of them are not even sleeping. They're not taking care of their personal hygiene. You will notice they are socially withdrawn. They want to isolate themselves from friends, from family, from schools. You will notice actually, like a child who was, good in certain sports, swimming, they don't want now to swim because there's a dented sense of self-image and a dented sense of body image. And then, of course, you will notice as a parent, if you're careful, or those around them, especially in school, change in their academic performance, a decline because they're constantly, trying to process this experience. So their concentration goes down, their sense of focus is also impaired. They're more likely to engage with eating disorders. And for some of them, then they still have the sexualized behavior, like we said with the children, so an increase in sexual activities. So those are some of the things and the symptoms that you see with children. But then again, it's not every child who is going to manifest all of them.
Right.
It's unique children based on other things that we could look at later.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. One of the things that I know, because being in the line of child protection and in the counseling world, I also know not triggers, the telltale signs that you've talked about can also be found with children who are going through stresses of different kinds and not just sexual abuse. So coming to you, Elvis, in the law world, what would you need to see for you to know we have a case? When we're talking about sexual abuse, when does someone come and say, you know what, this is what is happening? Because what Margaret has talked about, very many different signs that you can tell, but they can also be because the parents are going through divorce, and so the child is feeling the weight of it and many other things. So what is the thing that you'll be looking at that you say, well, this is what describes sexual abuse in terms of law?
Thank you, Terry. I'll just talk about sexual abuse in an overview of what the law says about it, because that's what we go through.
Mhm.
First and foremost, everything that deals with children is governed by the Children's Act.
Mhm.
And the first point at which we get a mention of sexual abuse, even before getting to the Sexual Offences Act, is the provisions, the rights of a child by themselves, yeah? And Section 6 of the Children's Act provides that every child has a right to survival, well-being, protection from abuse, and all that, yeah?
Mhm.
So that's inherent in the right of the child. It is also protection from abuse is actually a constitutional right of the child as well, under Article 53 of the Constitution. So there's a heavy legal backing for us to now talk about this, the right of a child to protection. Several sections of the law, including Section 22, and whenever there is a child who exhibit, and I'll talk about the various kinds of sexual abuse that the law recognizes in a short while.
Mhm.
But any child who is suspected to have been a survivor of sexual abuse or sexual assault of any kind is treated by the law as a child who is in need of care and protection. That means this is a special child with special laws requiring government intervention in many ways, either through mandatory provision of medical care and counseling and psychology, and even removal of the child from the place where this child is experiencing or has experienced this kind of sexual abuse.
Mhm.
And when we're talking about sexual abuse, predominantly we defer to the Sexual Offences Act, which then lists different types of sexual abuse. The most widely known one is defilement. That's an equivalent of what we would call rape for an adult. But now for a child, we call it defilement. So the unlawful penetration of a child's genital organs. That is what the Sexual Offences Act defines as defilement. And apart from that, we have...
Elvis, sorry for interjecting. So when we
Yeah.
talk about defilement, there has to be penetration. Is that what we are saying?
Yes, for defilement specifically, yeah.
Okay.
But we have other offenses that do not, other sexual offenses that do not require penetration. Because the sexual, when you're talking about defilement, Section 8 says a person who commits an act which causes penetration with a child is guilty of an offense termed defilement. So for defilement to be established, there must be penetration.
Okay.
If there wasn't penetration, then maybe that would fall under attempted defilement, yeah? And attempted defilement would then occur where the person attempted to have penetration with the child, but maybe one way or another did not succeed.
Right.
There was an
Wakili,
yes.
Wakili, you
Yes, yes.
do not get near a child under no circumstance. There is nothing
Yes.
like attempted. As a prosecutor, if you try to get near a child, I do whatever I have to do to protect that child. There is
Thank
nothing.
you.
If you attempt,
Yes. Thank you. I was just reading from section 9 of the offense of attempted defilement. That it says a person who attempts to commit an act which would cause penetration with a child is guilty of an offense termed attempted defilement. So you can tell the difference between section 8 defilement and section 9 attempted defilement. But I agree with Duncan. We do not want to wait for it to be an attempt or for the attempt to even move beyond an attempt. We err on the side of protecting the child at all costs. Yeah. And of course, then we have section 11 that provides for another offense as called indecent act with a child. Yeah. So an indecent act, it's very broadly put out here. Where it covers a lot of things, even unlawful touching of the child, yeah, and many other aspects. And then lastly, we have
Wakili,
promotion.
there is never
Yes.
lawful touching of a child.
Okay, Duncan, tell us. I think he should tell us
Okay,
since he's the
something about
prosecutor.
this.
Yeah, he should tell us since he's the prosecutor. I'm just reading from section from the law.
I like your passion, Duncan. Just give us 1 minute. Tell us, Wakili, tell us. We'll come to
No,
you, Duncan.
Yeah. No, I'm reading from section 11. I'm just going through the various offenses under the Sexual Offences Act. And when you see any section 11 says any person who commits an indecent act with a child is guilty of the offense of committing an indecent act with a child and is liable upon conviction to imprisonment of term not less than 10 years. So the minimum is 10 years. Now, when you ask me what is an indecent act, an indecent act is defined, the definition under section 2 of the same act, yeah? And this is what the law says, two major things. A, any contact between any part of the body of a person with the genital organs, breasts, or buttocks of another, but does not include an act that causes penetration. That is where I was getting the idea of unlawful touching. But the words that are used here specifically is any contact between any part of the body of a person, whether it's the hand, the head, whatever it is you're using, yeah, any part of the body of a person with the genital organs. Now, when you're talking about indecent act with a child, that means the genital organs of the child, yeah. And then also exposure or display of any pornographic material. That is also now here to any person against his or her will. Now, when we're talking about indecent act with a child, that is exposure of pornographic material to the child. Though for that, we already have we have another separate offense under section 12, which is called promotion of sexual offenses with a child. So that one, yeah, it says any person who manufactures or distributes any article that promotes or is intended to promote a sexual offense with a child, or who supplies or displays to a child any article which is intended to be used in the performance of a sexual act with a child, yeah? So this includes things which are like sex toys and all that. When you show a child that you are liable under that offense, yeah.
Yeah.
In that sense. So that those are, and of course we have child sex tourism, and child prostitution, child pornography. All those are sexual offenses that directly relate to the child. Now, that apart from that Omnibus Sexual Offences Act that now gets into detail, we have the last provision, the last act, which is called the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act.
Okay.
So the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act, the extent to which it deals with the sexual abuse for a child is where this child is exposed to sexual abuse within the context of a family setup. Yeah. And you'd say that there it creates an offense of sexual violence against a child in the context of a marriage.
Oh.
So maybe and at this point I'll just tell you, I'll share. This is a true story of a case, a very sad case that I did. There was this lady who had divorced from her previous husband, who was the father to the girl child, got married to another man. And this man, typical stepfather, no signs of any bad thing, no indication, only for this guy, this lady now, to come home one day and find that this girl had been defiled and killed. Like she had bled and died in the house, yeah? And the man had disappeared. Now, that kind of situation, is one of the things that break someone's heart, literally, because you just can't understand how something like this can happen to a 6-year-old girl, yeah? So, there is a lot of sexual abuse. Sometimes it is not spoken of a lot because, the constraints of a family setup, and taboo in society and a lot of other things. Maybe we can talk about some other time. But this is sexual abuse in the context of a family setup, either by a step parent or by an uncle or someone who's living with the child at that time. And the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act allows anybody who is around or who reasonably has suspicion that this is happening to a child to actually apply for protection orders for the child.
Okay.
In that sense, maybe, yeah. So that's generally, when you ask what we look at, these are the laws that we operate around when we're dealing with sexual abuse involving children.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Elvis. And I'm sure we're learning. I can see people are asking questions. Go ahead, because the nature of what we are discussing, you might not put it on the wall. Go ahead and DM the questions. We will be able to answer them. I can see we 660 of us. That's good. Keep sharing. We still have about 1 hour, 15 minutes to go. Time is really moving fast. Dr. I'm coming to you just to ask, with all the information we have from the psychologists, from the lawmakers, we know when we get to the part of court, we'll need to have a certain document from you, from the medical side that actually says, hey, the sexual abuse happened. This is what happened. So I would like for you to help us twofold. Number one is, what will you be looking for? And number two, what should we ensure? Maybe it's my cousin, or, I've just walked into this situation. What should I ensure is preserved that will help with the court case? Or how do I preserve, let's say I'm far away, inside my Sabit, I have quite a way to walk to the police station, if at all. What are some of the things as a parent as an aunt, as an uncle, that I should be looking out for, Dr. Kizi?
Thank you so much.
Easy, Daktari.
Yes.
Before you answer, Daktari,
All right, Duncan, you have the floor.
you know what we go through. These kids go through a lot. We bring these kids to you. You know what they go through. We get blamed for something we are not to blame for. On behalf of the prosecution, we do all what we can, and we do it pretty well. And what we all require is that we protect our kids. Whatever happens, how we do it, how we go about it, we just protect our kids. And we thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr.
All right. Thanks for that, Duncan. So I think let me take this answer as if we are talking in relation to a case that has occurred. Like, for example, someone has called you, this has happened in the last 24 hours. What are you supposed to do?
Right.
So let me start by explaining what forensic evidence is. So the term forensics, forensic or forensic science, forensic medicine, forensic dentistry, all those relate to court. It means court, something that requires a court proceedings to establish the facts that have occurred in a particular case. So in forensic medicine, it's the application of medical procedures, medical practice in a forensic case or a forensic system, which means, you know, when you hear the term forensics, it means you're dealing with a criminal case or a potential criminal case. And the forensic part is all about investigations to establish the facts that occurred. So it's about getting information that can be used to reconstruct the scene that is alleged to have occurred, the crime that is alleged to have occurred. That's what forensic really is all about. So from a forensic perspective, in cases of sexual abuse, we need to have, as the medical practitioner, we are looking for any kind of information that can assist the police investigate this case. And there are, of course, certain things that we want to look for. So for example, if you know, let's say someone walks into the clinic, you would want to observe the way this person's demeanor is, what kind of mental state is this person? Is not a very thorough mental status assessment, but just as with any other medical case, you have to observe the way the person walks into the room. Are they sad? Are they hysterical? Are they unconscious? Are they alert? Are they hyper? Do they appear to be on some kind of drug or substance or medication that is affecting their level of consciousness, their level of alertness? Are they dirty? What kind of clothes are they wearing? Are their clothes clean? Is the hair well kempt or not? Does this, especially with children, you really have to pay attention to the appearance of a child. Do they look small for their age? Are they undernourished? Are they overnourished? You know, even obesity is not good in children. Do they have any injuries? Is there blood on their clothes or dirt? You know, because I know, especially when I was very actively seeing children in these cases, many of them had signs of prolonged child abuse and maltreatment. So long before this incident occurred, they already had other injuries on their bodies at different stages of healing. They have signs of malnourishment. So, you know, brittle hair, they just look unhealthy, skin disorders, you know, all those things are supposed to be documented because that already gives you a general idea of this child. Are they well taken care of or not? Are they sad? Do they express apathy on their faces? And so on. It will also guide the examiner on what they need to do next. If you see like a child has possibly gone through prolonged abuse, you may want to remove them, continue the session without the caregiver or guardian present if there's a chance that that could be the abuser.
Right.
And if the child is with the abusive parent in the room, you'll not get any information. It will be very difficult. You won't be able to help them essentially. And I've seen many cases like that where the perpetrator is actually the person who has reported the issue and is blaming some fictitious person on what has happened. And then you have to find a way to separate the two. And then figure out, so what do I do with this child now? They've come here with the person who's the abuser. What do I do? Do I call the police? Do I, you have to really do a lot of thinking. So that what we document in the general examination is also evidence. Assuming that you find, torn clothes, blood stains and all that, you would want to have that that evidence captured. So in an ideal setting, there should be photography of the clothes as well, and of course of the patient, with ethical guidelines being applied, obviously. You'd want to collect those clothes as well, place them in a bag somewhere, a proper bag. There's, we are supposed to use paper bags and not plastic bags whenever we are dealing with evidence, because you don't want it to decompose, which is what happens when it's not stored properly, especially when wet. Then you want to look at the body and observe any, after you make those observations and before you go to examining the patient, you have to take a thorough history after getting consent. So there must be consent from the caregiver or the guardian or the person in charge. It could be a children's officer with a child, it could be a police officer with a child. There has to be consent. And even though sometimes you have consent for examinations from an adult, the child may not be willing. And so I've seen very many times where children are forced to engage or participate in examinations against their will. So what you have essentially is a fight. It literally is a fight. The examiners trying to force legs wide open, and it's terrible. And so one of the things whenever I'm training healthcare providers is just be kind, explain to a child what is happening, what it is you want to do, why you want to do it. Take your time, be patient, and they'll never, ever, you won't have a problem after that. But if you don't explain things, and I find that is a critical gap in the healthcare system, the lack of taking time to explain to the victim what is being done. Doesn't matter how old they are. Just explain and be nice. Imagine that works. It works very well.
Kari. Let me interject here. You saying this, and this is such a trigger for me, because one of our children in the home, we, after being brought, by the police and we started the case, there was a time we had to take her to hospital, and exactly what you're saying happened. We took her, she was told, open your legs, and she just, went into the fetal position, and she was screaming, and she said no, and she really said no. But I remember the doctor who was working on her, she just kept saying, we have to do this. Like we have to do this, because if we don't, you will not be able to have your case heard. But it was so terrible. We had to ask, please give us time, talk to her. And she refused that day. And I think after a week is when she was actually in a better position to, and of course we asked for someone totally different. But what happens, because we know trauma can be so deep, we don't know exactly what this girl went through, and we're trying to get the evidence, but time is lapsing. Talk to us, Dr. How does this work so that it's collected in the time frame that it needs to? Does it ever go bad that, well, it's been too long, we can't do anything?
Yeah, that's a huge problem. In fact, one of the things I would just like to state right now, because I don't want to forget, is the way in which adults address this issue. The way an adult or a person in authority approaches a child who has been abused can impact the rest of the process, either positively or negatively.
Right.
I know of a child who was abused in a school, and the teachers were so rude, mean, they were not at all friendly to this child who was really in a very bad place. In this particular case, they thought that the child was the perpetrator. And the child just shut down, and now the child is not able to be in school. We are looking at 2 years later, they can't go to school, they don't want to talk to anyone about it. So it's very important that we in the service, as service providers, we have to be very trauma informed. Anyway, let's go back to evidence. So now, after we look at the general examination, you've collected clothes, you've gotten a history. The history is very important because the history tells the examiner what it is to look for. It gives the examiner clues about the timeline within which they are working in. Timeline is important because certain evidence will not be found or may be difficult to collect after a certain timeline. It also guides the examiner on what medication they need to give or not give. So as a general rule, within the first 72 hours, there are certain medications like antiretroviral drugs and all that can be given within that timeline. Emergency contraceptives and all that. It's preferable, it must be done within 72 hours. And then, there are various other things that we need to look out for, depending on the timeline from when the incident occurred to the time the examination takes place. It's also important to know that when an incident occurs, you have a transfer of biological matter and all this trace evidence between the survivor and the suspect. There's a transfer of information, basically a transfer of evidence, right? And so immediately after the incident, since the incident has occurred, with every minute that evidence is being lost, it's reducing. So the sooner yes.
I think one thing you are not mentioning is that we need to get practical in this war. In this war, those girls, those kids, they've been fighting. They've fought all their life. They've fought. We've fought with them. We've been with them. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. So as I was saying, the timeline between the incident occurring to examination is very, very important. There's the 72 hours that we keep hearing about, and there's a lot of myths around this or misconceptions, but that's mainly a medical timeline because certain drugs cannot be administered after 72 hours have occurred, like for HIV.
All right.
And then, so when examining the body, we are looking for signs that there may have been a struggle. You're looking for signs that there may have been physical abuse. So, for example, looking for bruises or any injuries around the wrists, around the neck. Strangulation is also a very big part of sexual abuse many times. You want to look for other injuries, either caused by blunt or sharp force trauma or anything, thermal injury. I've seen all manner of combinations on the body of this survivor. And then after that, you could also be looking for stains that could be possibly semen, it could be blood, there could have been saliva from being licked on it. So the history is what will tell us whether we can collect and what it is we are collecting and how we are going to store it. Right. And then finally, we get to the genital region. And this, again, the history tells us what timeline do you have? Is there a need to make this child go through this process if it's 5, 6, 7 days after the incident? Will it make sense to do it or not because of the timeline? So in children, when getting genital or intimate samples, really it's about 24 hours before. That's the best time to collect biological samples, 24 hours. Why? Because in prepubertal children who have not yet reached puberty, the way their bodies, the anatomy of their genital region is seminal fluid or spermatozoa will not be retained within the genital region more than 24 hours, right? But if it's a child who has already started puberty or is even sexually active at a later stage, there may be, the body may be able to retain this biological fluids within them for up to, even 5 days, 6 days, and so on. So there are various timelines. Now I can answer your first question. What should first responders do? Right. most first responders make is to shower the child, bathe the child, change their clothes because they are dirty or they are smelly or they have to look clean. Now, when you do that, you have essentially removed the evidence that is required to build a case. So don't ever change, don't ever shower a child. I know sometimes it's easier said than done. Some children don't want to be that way. If I'm 16 years old, I'm not going to want to walk around looking a certain kind of way. So it's difficult. It's difficult, but in that situation, then the clothes should be kept in a paper bag and then go with them to the medical facility. So I recommend the medical facility to be the first point, first stop, because that's where medical treatment will be done, because that takes precedence over everything else, and evidence can be gathered as soon as possible. We don't
So
want
just
to
a
waste
minute, Dr.
time.
So you're saying medical first, not the police. It's because the police will still need to have evidence. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, medical first. The ideal setting would be to have the medical personnel and the police in one location.
Right.
But we know that that doesn't happen. Like it doesn't happen that way, especially where you don't have one-stop centers or rape crisis centers. So if you have to choose which one to go to, I recommend the medical facility, so that, especially with children, you do not want to keep a scared, traumatized child any longer than necessary from getting what they need for comfort. So if you go to the hospital first, then you get the medical treatment, evidence can be collected, painkillers administered, they can, all these things can be done just so that the child can begin to feel a bit better, even pain can be managed and all that, and also so that you collect evidence when it is still viable, all right? Then the police can either be called to the medical facility, or the survivor can then go to the police station. And then the following, there's a very long procedure, but that can happen after. As opposed to, because I've seen very many cases where children either go to a police station, then they are told, okay, go to the hospital, or they are told, oh, 5 days have passed, it's too late, you can't be helped. So they're taken round and round and round. And by then the mothers are tired. They just want to go home and sleep and just wash this child and help them feel better. So 2-3 days go by. Whereas if you start at the medical facility, all the necessary issues can be addressed at that one time. Once you have evidence at a medical facility, then you can take your time with other things, because the evidence is already there. The medical record has already been documented. You have your medical report, you have your evidence already in place. Then you can now sit down, breathe, and think, okay, what am I going to do next? As opposed to the other way around. I hope I've answered your question.
Terry,
Yes.
maybe let me just add to what Kizzy has said. Because I have acted both as victims counsel and counsel for an accused person as well. Yeah. One of the things that advocates who represent persons who are accused of sexual offenses, they do, is to challenge chain of custody and the integrity of the evidence collected.
Right.
So yeah, when Kizzy is saying that go to the hospital first, it is very crucial to do that. Don't even go to the police station. Go to the hospital. Have the integrity of that process scientifically secured, because even the government doctor will rely majorly on the initial hospital report that was done. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it is very crucial to maintain that. Go to hospital, then go report later on.
All right. And I have this
I
question
before
that
my
any of you
colleague
can
responds,
sorry,
before
go
my
ahead.
colleague responds, there's something we've been doing at ODPP, because we've noticed there's usually something about re-victimization of victims.
Right.
So we've developed a video recording equipment at NSSF, where we record victim statement so that they don't have to go back to the original statement, because we realized that we make our victims go through the same story over and over again, which is not proper. So there's a special place created by the DPP, Renson Igonga, who has created a space at NSSF separate from our headquarters, where all sexual offenses and child victims, where we record their statements and will protect them.
All right. Okay. I'm so glad to hear that. There's nothing as important as that. In my own case, and I went through rape, but not as a child. So it wasn't sexual abuse, but what we call rape as an adult. But that's one of the things that iced me to my last nerve is I had to repeat that story so many times. I've met this police, they asked for the statement. The next time I met another set of police, they asked me for the statement. I went to they asked me, and it's so raw at that time. And so that is such, it's such a beautiful forward move that we've achieved in our country. I really love that. Now, I have a question that any of us can take, and this one is, when we are talking about, someone is asking, they've been able to, their child went through rape, defilement, because she's 7 years old, and they were not able to report at that time. The lady is saying she was not able to report because it was the husband. And today they are, they're living separately. And so the question is, she says she still has the panty of their daughter with the blood. I mean, she took it as is with, maybe the semen, the what, but she preserved it. And it has been in a brown bag. I want to believe it, probably it's the brown paper bag or something like that. So her question is, if she would have the strength to bring it in today, would evidence be found? And this is 2 years later. Do you think there would be evidence there that would actually, something positive would come out to say, hey, she says it is the ex-husband, but then she could not report at the time. I think power play here. She has not said this is just me thinking. What do you all think? Is this something, maybe Daktari would answer this because we're talking about evidence preservation, and 2 years, she says it was in the paper bag. She hasn't said if she touched it, how she touched it, because probably that was contamination in one or another. But what would you say?
My apologies. I'm not a Daktari, but I think you can always get evidence. Any contact leaves a trace. There's something we were taught in science about any contact leaves a trace, which Shako would tell you that would leave a trace. You would never, ever, ever leave a kid in such a state.
Okay.
Maybe Daktari can give more details,
yes,
but I can
tell you Daktari.
It doesn't take long. Even if it's 10 years, we'll catch up with you.
That's good news.
Okay, so thank you for that. Before I answer that question, allow me to state something from the last question that I didn't say. For supporters of survivors, so parents, caregivers, guardians, and so on, one thing that they must realize and remember is that where, let's say, like the story you've just said, this child is defiled in the house, for example. Mom comes and takes the child to hospital. It must be remembered that that house becomes a crime scene. Yeah. So the location provided as, this is the room in which it took place, or it was this part of the ground outside, or whatever it is, that becomes a crime scene. And so no one should touch it. No one should enter that scene. No one should remove anything or add anything. It should be left alone. And I know this is, again, easier said than done, because how do you secure it as a civilian? What are you supposed to do? So once you get the medical report from the medical facility, you go and report to the police. The police are supposed to visit the crime scene immediately. It should be done immediately. Now, whether that happens or not is a whole other story. But that should be done immediately. The police are the same people, because custody of evidence is the police officer's role. It's a role of law enforcement, not the mother, not the caretaker, not some other person. It's the police who are supposed to handle evidence. So the police go to the crime scene with their crime scene officers, collect evidence there. That could be, sheets. It could be really anything. Once they know the story, they'll know what they're looking for. And then they collect evidence from the medical facility, and they're the ones who will transport that evidence to the government chemist for analysis, so for DNA analysis. And then they will also be the ones to collect the report from the government chemist and take it forms part of the police file that's presented to the prosecutors and so on. So please avoid carrying things with you in your, once something is moved from a particular location, then it becomes tricky, because now chain of custody has not been maintained. But maybe Duncan can tell us later, once I'm done, how they handle it. If, let's say, an incident occurs in a place where if you leave the bed sheets and the clothes and everything behind, you will not find them when you come back. So should I, as a mother or a caregiver, still put it in a bag and take it to the police, or what am I supposed to do? That would be something that it would be good for us to know from a prosecutor standpoint, how to address chain of custody from the crime scene itself, where you can see this evidence will be lost. As for the question you just brought,
Kara.
Yes.
Dr. has raised the question of chain of custody. It's one of the important questions we always ask as prosecutors. How did this evidence get obtained? Did Dr. obtain it lawfully? How did it pass until when it get to the forensic lab? So we always check on that. Who picked it? Who checked it? Who transmitted it? That's what we always check. And we never let it pass. As a prosecutor, I will never let that pass. A chain of custody.
The chain of
never.
custody is very important.
But what I would my apologies to take you back about the kids and interviewing them. It hurts. It really hurts to take the kids back and interview them of what they went through. It really hurts prosecutors. My colleagues get hurt. I get hurt. I've done it. I've been those worst stationed in Narok. It's been worse. It's been worse. And there are times I've called Daktari. I've called Dr. Shako a couple of times asking for advice. One time I called Daktari over a kid who had shot himself. I initially thought this kid had not shot himself. And Daktari told me, okay, call Dr. Odur. I think that's a forensic issue. I had called her over several other issues. So we prosecutors, we really check on everything. We really do. And we don't leave anything to chances. Thank you.
All right.
Absolutely, we do consult each other. This is a team you're seeing right here. We always back and forth to each other. So regarding the lady who says that she didn't report the defilement of her daughter, all right, yes, if she stored the innerwear properly, yes, it was in a brown paper, which usually, it doesn't have to be brown. The point is that it's paper and not plastic. Yeah, and it should be breathable, something that allows ventilation. because the idea of placing it in paper is so that the biological fluids on it or whatever evidence is on it does not decompose.
Right.
This is
Daktari,
why
she actually says, she actually says, aliweka huko juu kwa kabati and nothing else is there. So I don't know if that helps in your answer.
Yeah, so now I'm not sure. Maybe there's mold there. There might not be mold. The issue now is has the evidence been preserved properly, or has it gone through degradation because of mold? Hopefully not. The idea is just for, generally we say if clothes are wet, you air dry them. So we are hoping that that is the situation here. It has just air dried, which preserves blood and so on very, very well. 2 years is not long. It should still be able to give a DNA profile depending on the preservation. The issue will be, and knowing our criminal justice system, the issue will be, why didn't you report on time? Because I know 2 years, 10 years is still allowed, but in court, it becomes a why did you wait for so long issue. And defense lawyers seem to really like this. Mbona alingoja hivyo? Maybe she was cooking a story, all these things. And then the other issue is, did she get medical assistance? Did that girl get to a medical facility? If there's a medical report or even a psychological report, anything that was done to address that issue at that time, that can easily form evidential material, and then the prosecutors now will decide what else they would need and so on and so forth. So it's not a lost case. That's basically what I'm saying. Allow the experts to analyze and see what it is that is required and assist you to move forward with it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Duncan, I'm coming to
just
you
say
now.
Just a quick one.
Okay.
Just in 1 second. There's something called reasonable doubt. In order for someone to be found guilty of any crime, the prosecutor has to establish proof beyond reasonable doubt. So I'm talking about the aspect of reasonable doubt in the sense of the question that Dr. Kizi has just answered, yeah? A defense lawyer in that sense would try to argue, like the question she's saying, why didn't you report all this time? What has changed right now? And to the moment they go down that road, what the lawyer is trying to do is to establish reasonable doubt. And once that has been established, the person, regardless of whether or not they committed the act, will not be held liable for their act.
Wow.
I think Terry, if you allow,
if I may, that was a reasonable doubt question. If I may, what I can tell you for a fact, there is never time duration to report a sexual offense. There is never. If you are violated, please report it. If the police station doesn't act, you can always report it elsewhere. There's one violation which most of us have forgotten about, which still lingers on my mind, which still lingers on whatever I do. Do any of you remember the Githurai stripping? None does. But do you remember the rugby incidents? How that kid was violated? She's now a big girl, and I still maintain contact. So it's never about that. We still maintain contact. We never lose touch. That kid, she's now an adult. That kid that you saw on TV, she's now an adult, and I will never lose touch. That's it.
Okay. Margaret, you were saying something.
Yes, I'm listening to the question from that parent, and my concern here is they have not reported, and that's okay. That's okay from where they sit, and respectfully for that.
Yeah.
Is it because of power games? That one. They're probably feeling insecure, intimidated because of whatever reasons that could be there. And so probably maybe this person, if they probably needed more protection, almost to the cases, to the point where maybe if the threat was so bad, then that's where Duncan and ODPP would come in and probably want to have that child protected and placed under the witness protection. It's very important to explore what are the reasons behind this parent not wanting to, go ahead. Is that a threat to themselves, a threat to the child, a threat to the family? Then the second thing that I am concerned about is, so 2 years later,
Yeah.
where are they at emotionally and psychologically?
Right.
Has this child had access to any form of therapy? Has this family had any access to any form of therapy? Because when we talk about treatment for child sexual abuse, it is not limited to the child alone, but it is extended to the family because of the impact that that abuse has on the other family members. If there are other siblings and, the parents feeling like we didn't protect the child enough. Can you imagine? I'm trying to figure out, and just thinking, for 2 years, I have a brown paper bag in the house,
Right.
and once in a while, you probably get to see it. Can you imagine what that it is like? Legally, maybe it is not too late, but also in terms of them seeking help to process what happened, it is not too late.
Actually, I'm glad you asked that, Margaret, because she is saying that she has done a lot of work. She's saying she's done a lot of work and she's okay, but she's saying she now needs, she's done a lot of work and she's okay. And that is why she's actually talking about this. But then the child, there's no work that has been done. And this is why she's coming to seek for help she says in legal, just give me 1 minute. She says in legal, and she says when it comes to her mental capacity, and she says that child is right now, she's actually 8 years old. She's actually 8 years old.
For me, that's very unfortunate. Terry and the team here, when we talk about children in the justice system, what is justice? What has happened that this child can say, that this child has seen, and this child can say, you know what? They tried, they were defeated because of different things. But if nothing has happened, then this child, then it brings in the other aspect, as that we see that the children now also who are survivors of child abuse and child sexual abuse, then they no longer can trust the people around them because you didn't fight for me. You didn't push it. You didn't get any form of emotional support and any form of psychological support. So how do I trust that my well-being is actually a priority? So for those families also where they choose to, behind the tents and they want to have all manner of funny agreement at the expense of the child, then the child is left wondering, okay, so your brother is much more important than me, who is your child.
Right.
And if the mother has done a lot of work on herself, what about her child and her future in the years ahead? How has this child lived? What kind of trauma? What kind of fear? What kind of anxiety? What questions is this child asking herself? Like, truly speaking, where is justice for this child? And what does justice look like in the eyes of the child? And we always must consistently ask ourselves, what would this child say if we asked them?
Wow. Thank you.
What is the 18 or
Right.
they're 22? And we ask you, Mommy, why didn't you do this? Uncle, why didn't you do this? How comes there was no police? How comes there was no one? The officers, the medics, the psychologists through and came to help? I am sure we will not have an answer for this young lady.
That's true.
I think she deserves justice. Whatever
Right.
it is in her.
If I can just jump in.
Yes, Dr. Margaret, Margaret, your internet, just check on the internet as we come back to you. Yes, Dr.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Margaret is saying, that you know, when a child goes through such a horrific incident, and nothing is done, whether it's reporting the police or medical, you know, no kind of child-friendly, child-centered intervention has taken place. What happens is that, you know, even if the child might seem to be functioning fine, they are not. They've just shut down a part of themselves so that they can function, because they're not allowed. The environment is not giving them the opportunity to receive the justice they deserve. What happens is later on, when she starts, you know, when she's older, I've seen a child who went through this, and when they were 14, 15, they had a complete shutdown. Everything just fell apart. They ended up in a hospital for mental health intervention. They can't go to school, they can't play, they're always crying, depressed, using drugs to cope. It does not get better. Trauma does not just disappear without intervention. It may take on other forms. It may appear or manifest differently, but it won't just disappear. It's very important for that child to get therapy. If nothing else, focus on her mental well-being. If nothing else, you know. So I encourage that mother to see Miss Margaret behind the tent and just make a plan for her intervention. Yeah, thanks.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for that. So I know we have contacts for our panelists here today. So I want to encourage you wonderful lady who has gotten the strength and courage to reach out. We want to say thank you so much for that. And yes, go ahead and reach out to any of the panelists who are here and do what is right by this child. It might look late, but hey, you can still do something. The fact that you're coming, we really applaud you. We really applaud you. Duncan, maybe I would want to ask you, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing, you know, when you're trying to prosecute in the public prosecution office, what are some of the challenges that you're facing that would be elevated by either of these panelists or the system as a whole that would make it easier for you to prosecute?
What I can tell you, Kara, we've been there. Some of the challenges, Daktari has already mentioned them.
Okay.
Daktari, how we change whatever we do, how we keep on doing the things differently, how we have to move from one place to another, how we have to tell these kids. But what we've done as an office, speaking as a representative of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, what Renson has done, Renson Igum, there's a child-friendly room we have at NSSF, 19th floor,
Mhm.
where these kids don't have to repeat what they've gone through.
That's good.
These kids don't have to go. It's actually on 19th floor at NSSF.
Mhm.
It's on Upper Hill. If you get to NSSF,
Mhm.
if any person has an issue, if you have an issue with a child in conflict with the law, please call our helpline, send a text message, send an email. We'll always be there for that kid. We
Mm.
don't take anything for the child for granted. We do whatever we have to do on behalf of that child.
Mhm.
So NSSF 19th floor.
Mhm.
Alternatively, you can call the DPP helpline, and we'll always be there for you. Wherever you are, wherever, but a child should never get sexually abused when we are there.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's absolutely the ideal situation where, you know, I normally have this tagline, I say, take your hands off our children. And that's normally the ideal situation. Unfortunately, some people are not following the rules. You cannot imagine, panelists, that we have 28 minutes left. And so I want to go round because we barely scratched the surface, but so that we don't lock this, so that time doesn't elapse before we actually say something that we really, really need to say in our, various dockets. I want to just ask you, talking about sexual abuse and the part where the community needs to come together and and make sure that our children should be at the center of it all, that our children are safe. I want us to take a loop, that all of us be mindful of time because we have now 27 minutes left. If you all can just talk about something that you believe this is a game changer when it comes to prevention. Let's really talk about prevention because we've been talking about when it has happened. What is one of the things that you can say in your field you've seen that this would really help when it comes to prevention? And then what is some of the things that you can say when now it has happened? What is a game changer for this child? Whether it's counseling, whether it's rushing within the 72 hours, whether it's the way you preserve the evidence, what are some of the things that maybe you haven't mentioned that you can say, and then something that you would want it to be your parting shot? Let's keep it short because we have 27 minutes and we want to take a loop, and I know how time elapses because we've been taking at least one person about 30 minutes. So let me hear it. We'll start with you, Margaret, as we began.
Thank you. I think for me, I may not have one, I may have a couple, but I'll talk about just two.
All right.
I think for me, number one is prioritizing safety and my internet. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
It's prioritizing safety and security of the child. As a preventive measure before, so we make sure that our children are safe and they're secure wherever they are at any one time. But then also prioritizing the safety and security of that child after the incident has happened, because this is what is going to help in terms of access to treatment, management, and prosecution. So one of the things we need to make sure is that it's a very crucial step. That's non-negotiable. The children needs to be safe. And it doesn't matter who it is, but children need to be safe. And one of the other things about making sure that children are safe is through education. Let's have conversations about abuse with the children using age-appropriate language so that children understand and they can actually tell and keep themselves safe when something is not going on okay. So for that to also happen, the other thing which for me is big is creating a safe space for communication. A lot of the cases that probably Duncan would deal with, or even come to me, they will tell me it happened a long time ago, but they didn't speak up.
Yeah.
Because they don't think that the people around them would believe them. And some of those instances, you will get a child, it's because they now have an infection. They went to hospital for something else. And that's when Dr. Kizi and someone else, another doctor, realizes, oh my God, there's something else. But they don't talk about it. So if we make our homes safe spaces, if we make our environments, our faith communities, our churches, our schools, safe spaces that children can actually come and talk about that, then chances are that we will prevent, because a child will come and say, someone was trying to do 1, 2, 3. And so you intervene at that time. Or if it has happened, then it will be, the intervention is going to be immediate.
Right.
And soon. So can we ensure that we create those spaces? And the third and final thing, can we be a nation, a community, a society that appreciates that they are professionals and they're different professionals? You need a lawyer, you need a medical doctor, you need a prosecutor, you need a psychologist, you need a children officers, because that intervention is holistic intervention that should be offered by the professionals. When we embrace the professionals, then the children will get quality care, quality help. Let's be people who seek help. It's not a show of weakness. Thank you.
Let me tell you, I'm so
Probably
glad
before
Mhm.
Kara,
Yes.
Kara, before the professional goes off, there are some kids in Mavoko who their funding has gone off. We've been fighting, and their perpetrator is currently in Kenyatta National Hospital.
Mhm.
And you've no idea of that of that perpetrator.
Mhm.
He's fighting, he's almost dying. We, as prosecutors, we are almost giving up. But we see the perpetrator. I dealt with that perpetrator several years ago in Milimani court. And this perpetrator went and violated kids in Mavoko.
Mhm.
And my colleague calls me and tells me, we, ule mtu wako, he wasn't my person.
Mhm.
Amekuja hapa. That mzungu,
Mhm.
the Americans want to skin him alive.
Mhm.
And us, we want to do the same. And he's in hospital.
Okay.
Please, never judge the justice system in Kenya as weak. We do what we do within our means. Thank you.
All right.
Terry, I
Mhm.
know there's time, but allow me to jump in and say this to the people on call.
Right.
There's one report that we tend to not take very seriously, but that report can be the game changer, and that is the psychologist's report.
Right.
It's called the first
Because
information.
psychologists go with it.
First information.
Yes, they will get information. As a psychologist, I can quantify the trauma. I can tell you about the severity of the anxiety that that child is looking for. And so if we are looking to qualify trauma, can we also learn to be people in a justice system that looks for other professionals in the space
Right.
that are actually going to prepare this child before they appear before the court, but also work towards helping this child healing. So what are we talking about? It's a multi-sectoral approach when it comes to supporting these children.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with that. It's really a multi-sector. We have to work together. And one of the things that I have seen, even when it comes to counseling, Margaret, is when we take a child for counseling, we can actually see they're able to begin to trust that person and even open up. But you mentioned something that I've found resistance in different quarters when we say we need to prepare the child for for court or for something like that. I want to tell our viewers, when we talk about this, it doesn't mean we are training. It doesn't mean we are putting words in the child's mouth on what to say and how to it's simply getting the child ready, make the child have confidence, know, hey, we are backing you, we are here. We are not trying to say that go and conjure this, say this about this, but that is not the preparation. Margaret, briefly, just talk to us about that preparation, because so many times it has been construed. You know, people have not understood what we say when we say we are preparing the child for court, or we are preparing the child for this proceeding.
When
Kara, one of the things that as an office we've done on behalf of the ODPP, we've done, we have a child interview room where the child is interviewed and the child doesn't have to repeat the same story over and over again, because there's something we were told about revictimization.
Right.
So we never want that child to repeat the same story of what that child went through. So once it's recorded, it's a room where everything is recorded, pursuant to DPP's directions. We record everything, and we can repeat the same thing, and we will defend the same thing as prosecutors in court. We'll never, as prosecutor, allow our child victims again to ever be re-victimized.
Okay. Thank you so much, Duncan. Yes, and you can see Duncan has really belabored on this point, just trying to show you how important this is. And sorry, and I love that, because our children, if there's one thing that really drains them, is the over and over again. And truly that poses as a re-victimization. Margaret, briefly, please, let me tell us about the preparation, then we will go to Elvis.
Now, the reason this child needs to see a child therapist, and I'll be very specific, please take them to a child therapist where possible, is because number one, we want them to heal. Even as the justice system process is going on, we want the child to heal or to start their healing journey. That's number one. Number two, when we are talking about preparing the child to go to court, like you rightly said, Terry, it's not to tell them, go and say this, go and say that. We don't know. I mean, as a child psychologist, I don't even have the court access to the court file. So I don't even know what, documents and applications and everything. Even her own testimony, I don't have access to that. So I don't know that story. So what do? We want this child to be able to manage her own sense of anxiety. They will go to court. Some courts, and Duncan can tell us here, and Elvis, some courts don't have the privilege of voice distortion. So they'll hear this person. They'll hear the voice of the perpetrator because they're in the same courtroom, even if where there's a screen. It's not every court that has a voice distortion. That voice is a trigger. So you want to give them skills of when you hear him and voice, how can you manage your anxiety so that they don't get into a freeze mode. If you're asked and you have to, point out that it is this person who did this, if you lock eyes with this person, they're going to intimidate them through their nonverbal communication. So how do you manage yourself? When you're asked a question by the magistrate, how do you respond? Not what you say. How do you respond? When that preparation is about, you want to let them know, tell the truth, whatever the truth is according to you, not according to what other people are saying. So it is not coaching them what to say. And sometimes even lawyers want to send children to the child psychologist to coach them. We don't do that. We prepare them by giving them the skill and empowering them to manage themselves in court. There are instances, Terry, I have appeared and I sat with a child as they testified throughout their testimony as a way of just giving that child the confidence and just knowing I am safe. Margaret, he says, my therapist has walked with me on this journey. And allow me to say this to the people in the justice system. I know we want to rush these cases, but if a child is not ready to appear before court, then that's where now Duncan is talking about re-victimizing them and everything else. We need to make sure they are ready. How are we going to make sure that they are ready? Initiating the intervention at the earliest opportune time.
Okay.
Excuse me, Kara,
Yes.
the last speaker has talked about us rushing through.
Mhm.
We don't rush. As prosecutors, we don't rush. We just get angry of what those kids go through.
Mhm.
So we don't rush anything.
Mhm.
We are just angry.
Okay. It's the passion. I believe it's the passion to see justice being done. But then, as Margaret has said, we also have to balance it out so that we make sure that we don't have it, a cracked prosecution system, because we also need to get the victim ready so that we can actually have our at the end of it all, we need someone to be behind bars. So that's very, very important. Elvis, please jump in here and, with a few words, let us know what we're talking about, the prevention or when it has happened, something that you don't want to leave before we get to know how we can be helped when we talk about sexual abuse.
Okay, thank you. Very briefly, let me start with prevention. I think there's a lot more that we can do, both from government and private sector, in terms of sensitization. And I think we are not we've come a long way, but there's still a further long way to go.
Yeah.
The legal system allows for what we call whistleblower protection for if you know that there's a child somewhere who's going through some kind of sexual abuse or anything, and you feel like you'll be victimized and all that, you can fall back on whistleblower provisions to be able to make that confidential report, which can then be acted upon by the relevant authorities. The law, especially the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act, empowers even strangers to go to court. If you know there's a child who needs help, you don't have to wait for their family or someone else. You say, that's not my family, I will walk away. You have the power to actually get protection orders, make complaints, represent that child in the event that there are such things. And lastly, there is need for a lot of law reform. I've been trying to advocate for the establishment of Good Samaritan laws that make it mandatory to report sexual abuse, especially for children. Currently, under all the regimes of the law, including the Sexual Offences Act and the PADVA, especially Section 7 of the PADVA, uses the word may. That says any person who reasonably suspects an offense may give information. So we're pushing to have it mandatory that if you've seen a child or you're suspecting an offense has happened, you must report it. Otherwise, you yourself are complicit in that sense. Yeah. So that is part of law reform. And also just support, because the process for survivors is usually a very lonely journey sometimes, yeah? And especially where children are involved. So working with these survivors, offering that shoulder to lean on goes a long way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elvis. A question has just come in for you, and someone is asking that, just 1 minute. So someone is asking about okay. Let me not read that. She says she's going to get in touch with you directly. That's not for the public, but I have another question for you that says,
I think, Kara,
in any way, 1 minute, 1 minute,
Kara,
just give me 1 minute. Elvis, someone is asking, when someone gets into into the reporting, and then it shows as if the evidence collected around it, it's not quite supportive. And you're talking about the Good Samaritan. Is it already in effect? Is this something when you suspect, hey, my neighbor, this is what I'm suspecting is happening? It's a very dicey situation. How does that person report? What happens? Because they don't want to be known that they're the ones who have said something. What happens in this case?
Kara, have you ever, before Wakili answers, let me ask you one thing. Have you ever heard of the case that we did years ago about that stripping? Go back to the stripping cases that we had as a country. Have you ever heard how we got the first victim? Have you ever heard how we talked to her and convinced her that we'll protect her? Have you ever heard of her? And the guys who did that were sentenced to death. Their sentence was reduced to life. And today, do you know what the Supreme Court has said? Do you know what the Supreme Court has said? Ask your wakili to read the Supreme Court decisions.
Thank you, Duncan. Elvis, please go ahead and how can we help this lady?
Yeah, so in that case, so, if I've understood correctly, maybe you're a concerned neighbor and you suspect something could be happening, but you do not have proper information. Like you don't have the full evidence to go and bring that up. You still report. The first place, what the Children's Act says for children who are in need of care and protection, you go to a children's office. You don't even necessarily have to go to the police station to say, I think this is happening. Go to the children's office nearest to you. Mostly they're within where the chief's office is or the government offices. You find where the children's office is. You say, I am a neighbor here. I have been looking and seeing this. I think this child is not okay. Something is happening. And you leave it at that.
Right.
Once you've done that, the children officer will not force you to record a statement that would happen. That officer who has the legal mandate to now go and knock on that door and say, we've had, there's a suspicion that this child is in need of care and protection. We want to talk to the child. We want to ask questions. We want to look around the house. Then if there's any evidence that is now found, the police are involved. In that way, then you as the concerned neighbor, your anonymity is still protected in that sense.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. That's really, really helpful. Duncan, this is your time. Talk to us briefly. We were going to finish with Dr. Ikizi. Talk to us about, something that you feel we shouldn't close this before we get to know about it. This is your time. Very few remarks. Duncan, are you with us? All right, we're going to move on to Dr. Kizi. Daktari, tell us, we have about 6 minutes left. Just take a few minutes and let us know what can we do so that we ensure the prevention part of it, and maybe something that you cannot let us go without telling us.
Thank you so much. So I have so many things to say, but I'll try to keep it short. I just wanted to add to Elvis's remarks, which are very spot on. There are also national hotlines that can be used to give information anonymously. So like the child helpline is 116, there's 1195. There are very many others, which I'm sure, Terry, maybe I can give you some if you don't already have them.
Yes.
There are very many organizations and like Wangu Kanja, FIDA, and many others who you can call to get this kind of assistance from. Essentially, what they'll do is go through the children's office, who can work with the police to just knock on any door required. The other thing that I would like to mention is that as Margaret was talking about seeing a therapist, I realize many people don't know who a therapist is. Is it a psychiatrist? Is it a counselor? Is it a psychologist? Who is a therapist? Who are we supposed to go to? The reason I'm saying this is because I myself and many other victims have come across therapists, counselors. We don't know their levels of qualifications. We don't know who we are supposed to be looking for. It's a whole other world. So perhaps you can cover that one day on who is what kind of therapist are we looking for. And then one other major thing that really matters is this issue of vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma is secondary trauma that service providers encounter when they are dealing with cases that are horrific, traumatic, sad, terrifying, desperate. There's a lot of despair. So like all of us here who are speaking today could easily end up getting trauma from the cases that we are dealing with. I noticed that service providers tend not to, or do not know that they need to get regular debriefing or regular psychologist intervention to ensure that they don't end up depressed with burnout. You're now abusing all manner of things to cope, working in, there needs to be some structure in every single organization to address vicarious trauma in service providers so that you can do your work productively and without carrying baggage home and, going down the wrong path. I also think my parting shot is that the medical service providers and many others across all the disciplines, because we need to work together for optimal efficiency, it's important that we get training in managing evidence.
Dr.
Yes.
Rudeyo, can you go back to the part of vicarious trauma? Vicarious trauma.
Yes, so vicarious trauma is a simple way to say it is this is a secondary trauma or trauma that service providers who work with victims who have gone through trauma end up getting. So it's like it's passed on to the service provider. You're listening to 10, 15, 20 cases every day of a child who's been defiled, a mother who has been abused and all that. It ends up affecting service providers very negatively if they do not get regular counseling or therapist from a trained clinical psychologist or trauma therapist. It's very important to do this regularly to avoid issues like substance abuse, to avoid issues like depression, to avoid anxiety, to avoid isolation. You end up going through symptoms like that of the person who has endured the incident. Sort of, not all the symptoms, but you end up going through negative psychological effects. And so it's important for organizations that are in charge of various dockets to have a system in place for the service providers to get regular debriefing, so to speak. It's very important to do that, so that you can have a good quality of life. Yeah. Finally, training is mandatory for, training is very necessary for service providers to adequately address these cases so that victims, survivors can be able to participate in their court cases in the road to justice, and so that evidence is properly handled, because this greatly affects the way cases are going to turn out. And the last thing we want is for a perpetrator to be walking scot-free amongst the public, and we'll just continue defiling over and over again. For me, this is what I really advocate for this in terms of prevention, because we need to have the right people behind bars and not on the streets. So thank you so much. This is amazing, and keep up the good work, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is our time. You cannot imagine, that's the mark of 2 hours, but I cannot leave without saying thank you once again to Duncan, Elvis, Margaret, and Dr. Kizzy. You have really spoken to us. I know we have not, we had so much to talk about, but that is our time. So I will request for us to continue with this conversation. Maybe we can do it monthly. Dr. Kizzy brought in a very, very good thought. We don't know who are we seeing? The psychiatry, a counselor, a therapist. In what time do we need to see who and who is who, Then the justice system, the prosecution office, the medical, it's just a wealth, there's a deep well that we really need to go deeper. Now, Contacts of our panelists are right there on the screen. You will be able to see them, get in touch with them, reach out, ask. I have so many questions, and so many questions people are saying they're private, okay? 600 plus of us have been here for the past 2 hours. I truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you. This just shows that you are concerned about your children, about your grandchildren, about your cousins, nephews, you know, nieces. We are truly, truly grateful that you're here. Together we act, united we change. It cannot happen if we do not have a multi-sector coming together. We need men, we need women on the same table. This is not a gender power. We actually need both genders to sit on the table and discuss about sexual abuse, how we can prevent it, because it's not even supposed to be happening in the first place. But that is also why we have the justice system. We have systems in place, and of course we are making them better by the day so that we ensure that our children are safe. So thank you once again. This is Kara Olmurani Virtual Symposium 2025, and we want to sign up by saying you need to take something, you need to take charge of the environment that you're in. You actually need to open your eyes and see what is happening, not just without, but within, because our children are going through defilement in our homes. So before you look outside, begin to ask yourself, who am I having in our home? You know, is which uncle, which aunt, which nephew, which, all these people, we have to be very, very alert who is in our environment, because we have to protect our children. Once again, thank you. Thank you. We will see you not next year, but we will be having this monthly, bringing in different professionals so that we can be educated on what we need to do. Once again, our panelists, asanteni sana. Thank you so much.
Shukran.
All right,
Thank you.
bye-bye.